I'm going to just welcome everyone. Welcome everyone. This is our first artist talk, and today we are with Travis Fox and Susan Farkas, who's going to be asking the questions and moderating this talk. And the session is also broadcast live on Facebook. So, and I'm telling you all this, I am monitoring the people coming in, so sorry for the interruptions. So I'm Sevan Milikian, and I own this gallery in High Falls, New York, where we have several photographs of Travis Fox being exhibited. Just for you guys to situate where this is all happening, High Falls is a hamlet in the bucolic Hudson Valley. Not all of you are from around here, so I had something planned. Let's see if I can do this. So let's see. I wanted to share a few things with you. So okay. So here we go. So this is where I'm talking to you guys from. This is the gallery building, but also my home. And the window you see on the top right is where I am. So now you know that this is virtual, but there is a real person behind the window doing this thing. You know, that's lucky. You don't always get to see that. Let me make sure that, again, some people are waiting. No, we're good. Okay, so I've been running this gallery for almost 10 years now, so that's kind of fun. And again, this is my home. The gallery occupies 1/2 of the lower ground, and then I can a little bit show you how this looks. There's nothing like a little video to give you an idea. So this is the room in which Travis's pictures are being exhibited. But what you're seeing right now are just a group show that's happening in addition to Travis's show. And these are the 8 pictures that we are exhibiting from Travis's book Remains to be Seen. And this is called the One Wall Show. Since the pandemic, I am not changing the whole gallery because I get so few people coming in due to the pandemic. I've just limited the visitation. So I only changed this section, this portion of the gallery. So that's why I call it One Wall Show. That's a new concept. And I like it so much that I might actually continue doing this, even if we are out of this dark tunnel. Let's see. So this show is going to be here for another weekend. So I only, keep these shows every 3 weekends. We have 8 pictures of Travis's work here, and they are pulled from his book that I have right here. I mean, I don't know if you can see, here is the book. And this, there are dozens and dozens of pictures in this book. It's fabulous. It was extremely difficult to select the books. I had the honor to do the selection. I chose them based on their, qualities, artistic qualities, actually. And I got lucky that 2 of them are kind of relevant to our area, very relevant. And that's really purely chance. I didn't even think about looking at where these pictures were taken to make it locally relevant. So it happens to be 2 great pictures, and those pictures are very close to here. And the book is for sale for $45. And I'm sure that Travis will be happy to sign the book for you if you buy it from the gallery. So there you go. I did all this talk actually just to make this pitch. Now we can maybe all go home. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's see. I have a couple of people to let in. So Travis Fox, let me give a little bio here. Well, first of all, he's local. This gallery only shows artists who are based locally. I'm talking maybe 10, 15 miles radius, no more than that. Actually, his home is in Crumville, which is about 10 miles away from here. Travis Fox is a documentary maker. His work has appeared on PBS, National Geographic, Al Jazeera, and the New York Times. He's a graduate from the Missouri School of Journalism. And from 1999 to 2009, he worked as a senior video journalist at the Washington Post and was widely recognized as a pioneer of news video on the web. he covered such major stories as the 2003 invasion of Iraq and the war in Afghanistan. In 2006, he won an Emmy Award for web video coverage of Hurricane Katrina on WashingtonPost.com. Fox is the director of visual journalism at the Newmark J-School. He has also taught multimedia filmmaking at the Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. So this is really a super short version of his bio. If I left something really out, please complete this bio. And Susan Farkas is going to help moderate this talk with Travis Fox. And Susan is an Emmy Award winning video producer with many documentaries on international and domestic topics to her credit. And full disclosure, Susan is the one who tipped me about Travis Fox, because, second full disclosure, Susan is a very dear friend of mine and my wife's, Maria's. She actually is just a few yards away from here. She lives in High Falls, just in this neighborhood. So I take this opportunity to thank her for introducing me to Travis, and for accepting to do this interview with Travis today. So at the end of this talk, which is supposed to last just until about 5 o'clock, we'll have a Q&A. Okay, so if you have any questions that comes to mind while this talk is going on, please send me a chat. And I will put that down somewhere. And at the end of the talk, I will field those questions myself to Travis. And at this point, Susan, may I let you take it over? And thank you all for joining us today.
Well, Sivan, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for hosting Travis's show. Travis and I are colleagues at the CUNY Journalism School, also now called the Newmark Journalism School. And so I know him as a dear colleague and a video producer, and I wasn't that familiar with his photo work. And I must congratulate him on this amazing work that he does as a drone photography, because I've been looking at this book since you invited me to do this, and this book is absolutely mesmerizing, and his photographs are mesmerizing. And so, Travis, I'm going to ask you about the photographs, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about specific photographs that are in the show and a couple of extra ones that I'd like to ask you about. You know, I tried flipping through the book, but the photographs are very arresting. You don't really flip through this book. You stop and stare at these photographs, and you ask yourself, you know, what are these photographs telling me? Not only about specific photographs, but what are they telling me about America? Because this is a book about 20th century America, or coming into the 21st century, and they're telling us about the development of this country, about industrialization, about the changing America, about, you know, abandoned places, about places that we have polluted, about places we have destroyed, about places that we have treated with racial indifference or worse. And so I'm sure, and obviously you've traveled all over the country, Travis, to take these photographs, and taking photographs by drone is not easy. I don't know, I've never done it, but I know that, you know, finding those places, getting a drone up there, finding the right weather, getting the right angle on a place with the drone is not easy. And so I'd like to ask you about your concept behind this book. What were you thinking? What was your overall intention with taking these photos and selecting them?
Thank you. Hi, Susan. Good to see you on the computer here. Let me just say thank you to Sivan and you, Susan, for inviting me here. It's very nice, and that introduction was flattering, to say the least. So I appreciate that. And hello to everyone. Lots of familiar faces, old friends. It's good to see you all. So yeah. So what was I thinking? I don't know. Good question. What was I thinking? I ask myself that quite often when I look at these photographs. No, I think, you know, I was, you know, the drone is kind of this in between way of seeing things, right? It's not on the ground, but it's quite different from aerial photography as we've seen it up until this point. Helicopters and planes fly a lot higher. And the drone is this kind of in-between phase of that, right? So you're close enough to see details, but you're far enough away where the three-dimensionality of the Earth doesn't quite make sense from the air looking straight down. And so, you know, I stumbled upon this area in the Catskills, one of the Borscht Belt resorts in Fallsburg, New York, called the Pines. And I was fascinated. It's that photo you see there of the tennis courts. And I think, you know, as I was experimenting with the drone, I was, you know, experimenting with these images from an aesthetic point of view. And what I realized at the Pines, you know, years ago, this was 4 or 5 years ago, is, you know, I saw kind of the history of this place as it was deteriorating. And so it wasn't, you know, you see the kind of the natural things taking over the physical man-made things. And you see the lines, the straight lines that man-made kind of intersecting with the diagonal lines that nature inevitably makes. And so I was kind of fascinated by that. And I found that to be a mirror of the way these pictures are made, that in-between phase. And so I was interested. And so I focused on setting out and looking at history, but not ancient history, not Gettysburg, not things so far in the past, but things that are in the recent past that are still part of our memory, but at the end of our memory, right? So cultures, areas that are kind of within our culture, but are quickly becoming history as the physical representation of these bits of culture is fading as well. And in another generation, you know, they'll be gone, both physically and you know, perhaps from our collective memory as well.
But you know, what's interesting is that, you know, we do see where nature and man-made, where we've sort of inflicted wounds. They almost look like wounds on our planet, and we do see where nature and man have intersected on these. But there's never any horizon. Like, you look straight down and they really exist almost as abstract works of art as well as social comment. And so that was clearly a choice, because all the way through the book, there's never a horizon. It's always straight down. That's a choice you made.
Yeah, it was a choice. It wasn't that the drone was just broken and it was hanging down, you know. But no, I did give myself some boundaries, and one of those is that it's always perfectly 90 degrees. So there's not even a hint of horizon. So these photographs, they're on the wall in a certain way, as you see, but they could be, because there's no horizon line, they could be upside down, they could be verticals. That doesn't matter based on the content, right? Because you're looking straight down. It's also, so that's one point. The second point is that I wanted to, or two more points, let's say. So I wanted to, you know, you're kind of disoriented when you're looking at them this way. And that's on purpose. And so the idea is that maybe the composition kind of brings you in, it intrigues you, but it also confuses you, and you don't get a sense of perspective or scale at first glance. You really need to study it to understand how far up am I? Am I close? Am I far? Is that a tennis court, or is that a painting on a wall? And that's done on purpose. And so you're supposed to be pulled in aesthetically, and then you know, the hope is that you spend a little more time with it. And in doing so, you kind of spend some time with the memory that this represents. And you think about, well, what happened to these resorts? You know, what happened to the people that were at these resorts? And then, you know, copy that over all the different places that I went. Also, from an aesthetic point of view, I think when you're a still photographer, you know, it's a two-dimensional medium, but you want to create like hints of three-dimensionality. That's what talented photographers do, and that's where foreground, middle ground, and background comes from. And you take these layers and you make them interact with each other. Good photographers do that. I can't. I've never really was that good at doing that. And so this is a kind of the opposite. So you're taking three-dimensional spaces and you're completely flattening them. And so, you know, this one was flat, but a lot of the other pictures have, you know, tall buildings, but they appear completely flat. So that was an exercise in the aesthetics of photography.
Yeah, well, in some of them we do see quite a bit of depth, but in some of them also you do show a side-by-side relationship, which is very important to you, which we're going to get to. How high up are you when you're using a drone?
So per FAA regulations, I'm never higher than 400 feet. Okay, so that's the uppermost limit, which when you're trying to show a large swath of Earth is quite limiting. A lot of these, the ones you see on the screen now, were quite a bit lower than that. I don't think any of these, maybe the cul-de-sac on the bottom left there was up close to 400 feet, but all the rest were probably 100. The tennis courts, yeah, so this one was up pretty high, but the rest are probably in the 100 to 200 range.
Mm-hmm. So that's really not that high. I mean, if you're a New Yorker, you could be looking out like a tall building, and you would be about that height, right?
Yeah, it's about 10 feet per story, so 100 feet would be a 10-story building.
Yeah, just to give a
Yeah.
to give a relationship. So so the tennis court, for example. I mean, the colors in your photographs are extraordinary. Did you use filters, or how did you get these colors?
No, that's what it looks like. I mean, tennis courts are green, painted green, and with red around there. There's really nothing else. There's no, fancy Instagram filter on that. That's the way it looks. And when you're up above, looking straight down, you see it in a way that you don't see it from the ground. When you're looking at this on the ground, you see tons of rubble all around it, and overgrown trees, and a lot of other things that take your attention. But when you're up above and looking straight down, you can crop all those out. By positioning the drone directly over them, and then you can focus on those colors.
Well, what's the red? I mean, the green is the tennis court, but what makes it so red?
So the red is the paint that they used around the tennis courts originally. These were indoor tennis courts.
Oh.
And so the building itself is gone, right? And so this paint, which was indoor paint, is exposed to the elements when it wasn't. They have outdoor tennis courts there, and that kind of deteriorates in a different way. This has a particular way of deteriorating.
So you started the project in Fallsburg, and then you traveled. You traveled all over you went far and wide for this project. And how did you choose some of the other locations that you went to? You went to California and Pennsylvania and Ohio, and the breadth of the book is really extraordinary. How did you choose where you went?
I mean, it was a work, I had the, being a professor and teaching most of my time and working on this, during the off times and traveling, I had the luxury of, I suppose that's what's nice about being in the ivory tower, right? Is I could think about these things over years and months and experiment. And I went a lot of places that never panned out. And so, I was interested in Fallsburg and that story of the pines almost as an accident, right? Just because it was close to where I was, and it was a place that was interesting. I didn't give it much thought, more than like, well, it's a place that if I crash, it's not going to really hurt anyone below, and let's try it. And then, from there, I thought a lot more about it. I worked on a project called Scars of Racism, which dealt with the legacy of institutional racism, redlining, and the sort. A lot of the photographs from that show are in the book as well, and so. And I just slowly kind of built up to this topic. And what I realized is that it was that idea of history, and when does, memory become history, and that transition that I discovered at the Pines. It was really that I kept coming back to over and over again. And eventually I put it all together and realized that this could be a book. This was a book. And then it simply filled in the gaps of places that I hadn't.
Actually, I'd love to show that photograph. You mentioned redlining, and of course, racism is an issue on all our minds these days. And Savan, can we see the photo from page 67 that you pulled? Because this is very interesting. Yeah, redlining, as I think most people on the line will know, was a practice where banks just literally redlined maps, and those one side of the line were people of color who did not get bank loans, and on the other side were people who did get bank loans, and they were white people. And you can now physically see the results of that policy. Not sure is that the photo I was thinking of? Can you see redlining in this photo? I thought it was,
I mean, this was part of Scars of Racism for sure, and this is a for sure a legacy of redlining. This is Baltimore, West Baltimore. You know, this is a neighborhood like a lot of neighborhoods that were redlined, and so.
Knocking
so,
Baltimore, Savannah.
Yeah, so back to Baltimore, and so you know, with that, you know, when homeowners couldn't get mortgages, you know, the smaller urban factories left, went to the suburbs where the highways were being built, and you know, and then the white folks were able to get mortgages in those developments that were more restricted for Black folks, and so you know, this is a familiar story. So in Baltimore, you know, like a lot of cities, these are houses that were redlined that are now abandoned and being torn down.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of remarkable to see it as such a sharp visual image of a discriminatory political policy. And there are a couple of other pictures of that in the book. And then maybe we could look at that photograph of the white tree that's in the show, because that's another fascinating image where you could really see, you know, what we've done to our environment. And of course, there are many pictures in the book where you can see that. And there are a couple from Old Forge, Pennsylvania. But this photograph, talk about this. This is amazing. I mean, it's just, again, riveting to look at, but also tells us a lot about what we've done to our environment.
Yeah, so I was looking again, you know, taking this theme of history, you know, and you know, a lot has been done with drone of environmental effects. So I wanted to be really careful how far down that road I go with this book, because there's a bit of distance between my main theme and that. This is, but I thought this was relevant. This is the eastern shore of Maryland, Dorchester County, and you know, it's the first kind of visual effects of sea level rise. So the eastern shore, of course, is just inches and even less above sea level, and so that change of water has poisoned some of the groundwater on the eastern shore, and so what that has done to a couple different species of hardwood trees is killed them essentially. So they're not getting access to fresh water. The places where they're drawing fresh water is contaminated with salt water, and so that causes this bleaching effect of the trees, and it kills them. But before it kills them, it turns them completely white. So it's not a birch tree, you know, white birch. That's a hardwood. It's maples and oaks, and so it doesn't affect the bushes and the ground cover. And so I thought that was a stark contrast, a stark example.
Yeah, and you know, and so Van picked this photo, and there are many photos in the book that are just beautiful. And he picked it because of this interesting art, and of course it is, but then it also is kind of a chilling photo for what it says about, you know, what we've done to the environment. And maybe we could also look at the cover photo. There's a fascinating story about that, which is more about you know, some of the dreams that people had and that didn't quite get realized. There's this photo, which has just a great backstory to it.
Yeah, it's a great story. California City is a failed planned community, much in the tradition of Levittown, right, in Long Island, which of course was the opposite. Was very successful. So this was a New York entrepreneur who bought hundreds of acres in the Mojave Desert and went to plan the second biggest city in California, their dreams of, and modeled it after using New York City place names as a Central Park, First, Second, Third Avenue, and so forth. So because it's in the desert, he laid out all this suburban street grid, and because it's the desert, it has remained over the decades, and so. The area around Central Park still exists. You know, there's 7,000-8,000 people living there now. But overall, the grand idea he had of this like utopian suburbia in the desert was a failure. And I love the symbol of the cul-de-sac for that vision.
I'd like to look, Savannah, at the one you pulled up before, page 73, the King of Prussia, the Road to Nowhere. That's kind of an interesting photo. Just only because it is a
it
road
this
to
one?
nowhere. Yeah, thanks. I don't know, there's just something surreal too about the colors of the houses on the left, and then this road that just abruptly stops. I guess we have these around the country, but
Yeah,
what was this? Yeah, what happened here?
it's weird, isn't it? I mean, there's a lot. There's an example of this in every city. There's, you know, there was kind of the rush to, just like in the previous city, the kind of rush to build out suburbia. There was kind of a rush to build highways as well, and so often these were built or planned before, like before the inn was planned, or before everything was connected. And so I thought this was a kind of a symbol of that rush to develop suburbia and build highways to suburbia. So this is an unfinished highway outside of Philadelphia. They use it to all the stripes. They use it to practice painting, like the machines that paint stripes. So that's what they use it for now, among other things. It's also the houses are sitting up on quite a big hill above it, right? So, you know, when you're on the highway or on the houses, you kind of can't see the other one because it's maybe a couple 100 feet difference in elevation in those two spots. But again, when you're up on the drone, this is another one that was probably 400 feet up. It just equalizes those two things, which you could never do from the ground.
Now, is there a perfect time of day to get these photos? Like, do you try to be up there at noon so you won't have too much shadow? Or when do you take these photos?
Yeah, I mean, you always have shadow. I mean, it depends if you want shadows. Often I like flying in overcast days because I don't want, like, shadows give you more three-dimensionality, and so often I'm going against that. It's not always practical. It really kind of depends if you want it or not. You know, when you're on the ground, you definitely want to shoot at magic hour, right? But, you know, sunset and sunrise. But for the drone, I found that, you know, in certain instances, shadows can really help you. You know, if you're doing, you know, maybe you've seen on Instagram, like the pictures of cows from above in a field and their shadow, like when you see the image of the cow. A lot of people have done that. So in some instances, it really helps you. But for me, I'm not a big fan.
Yeah, I was just noticing it on these houses. It's kind of interesting. And the colors, again, are so sharp, that, you know, that red there and the blues, and are really. Um, there was one photograph I kept going back to. It's on, I think it's page 41 or 42, Savan. There was, of the extra photos that we put in it. The one that looks like tar bubbling up. Can we take a look at those? Yeah, this one. This is a photo of, well, Travis, can you talk about this? It's
this is coal country. So again, like the Rust Belt, for better terminology, you know, just, you know, these places that were dominated by an industry which no longer are. So this is central Pennsylvania, near Scranton, and so this is coal. This is from a coal plant. These are coal tailings that are left over many decades, and so it's a place for ATVs to go, as you can see. And again, lots of these are essentially coal tailing mountains at this point. This is one, Susan, you talked about the shadows. This is one where the shadows really help. So maybe I should take back what I said before, because if this in a cloudy day, this would be a lot less interesting. So I'm going to strike that from the record.
this looks like this something bubbling up, and it's also interesting because it's obviously people have found a new use for this ruin, or this. We've kind of messed up this landscape, but look, there's the ATVs, and people are going and enjoying themselves there. Yeah. I mean, probably we've polluted the water and everything else, but people have found a way to enjoy this area.
The water is a bit acidic from the old mines in that area. It flows to the Chesapeake Bay, not far from where that ghost tree is that has died. So yeah, they all interconnect. I mean, also I find this interesting, you know, when I look at this and I look at the work from from Fallsburg, from the Pines Resort, like there, the nature has kind of come back a lot stronger. Whereas this one, not so much. You know, it's been decades since this was a mine, and it's still pretty empty. Nature has not come back.
And there's another one from Old Forge, right? From page 41. Let's see. 3. Yeah, this isn't, this one, I just kept staring and staring at this one.
Yeah, that's the natural color. There's some interesting rivers up there around Scranton that are orange. You know, and of course the drone loves that from above, just like it loves the color of the tennis courts, or it loves you know, salt production in California or other places. And so this is, you know, the water runs through the mines, you know, which are all underground. It runs through them, and the leftover iron ore from mining colors the water orange. So it's rust essentially. And so this flows through and can make the water acidic. And there's various programs, and there has been over the decades, to remediate some of this.
Yeah, like with when you blow it and you get closer, those white spots on the left, that's water, right? That's a reflection of the water, right?
Yeah, those are rocks. Yeah, those are rocks in the river that are not wet. And yeah, and then you see the highlights of the water.
Yeah, but it just, the color is so, it just overwhelms you, and it's kind of scary that the water is, I guess it's the water, not that color, but with what's in the water, it's not good.
It's not what you see every day. No, it's not. It's not what you see at High Falls, is
it? Well, let's look again at the photos that are in the exhibit. Let's talk some more about those. Sivan. Yeah, this one. This is definitely shows you depth.
Yeah, it does. It shows you, yeah, the relationship, the color of I like the color of the old roller coaster and of the trees, which are of course naturally that color, unlike the example from Chesapeake Bay. I was fascinated with amusement, the idea of amusement, and you know, this is not far from that previous picture in coal country, Pennsylvania, and just the idea of amusement that has moved on, or you know, in areas of the country where population has had a huge decline. These areas of Pennsylvania and Ohio, and the kind of the reminders of amusement that are left behind. I always found that fascinating.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, we as Americans just kind of walk away from places that we have no more use for, because I guess we have so much land and we have such a big country that we can do that now. Probably in the places in Europe, they would tear down something like this and build something else in its place, because they can't afford to just leave up structures that are abandoned. But again, it's a beautiful, fascinating image. And should we look at another one, Sivan? Love this. I love this. Yeah, tell us where we are now.
So this is also Pennsylvania, Pittsburgh. Oh, you have the locations there. So this is Pittsburgh. This is a Catholic church, and you know, was there for a lot of the Eastern European immigrants who worked in the steel production in Pittsburgh. And so, you know, as those jobs dried up and the steel mills closed, that population, that Catholic Czech and Slovak population, moved on, and this beautiful old Catholic church is left to deteriorate there. This was, just from a technical standpoint, this was one that was, you know, flying the drone is a little tricky sometimes. It's a little nerve-wracking for me. It can be scary. It's like a flying lawnmower. And it's
flying a lawnmower. How so?
Well, it's dangerous. I mean, the blades spin around, and it's loud. and it's dangerous if it falls from the sky. It's heavy and it's, you know, it has blades. And so here I'm quite close to the top of the, you know, right at the top of the cross. And that's of course where I wanted to be. But it wasn't, and this is a very congested part of Pittsburgh too, right? And so a lot of the places are I'm flying in the country, so there's fewer people to hit if you were to crash. And so this was one I remember, which was pretty nerve-wracking, but we were able to do it.
We'll talk about that a little bit. When you're actually flying the drone, what are you actually seeing the image that the camera is seeing?
Yeah, it's an interesting study in the two sides of my brain and how I work. Like I feel like on the ground as a still photographer, it's almost as a kind of artistic pursuit, it's almost relaxing. Like you can kind of get into the image in your head and you can think about it, and you need to kind of get into that creative zone, however, for lack of a better way to explain it. But on the drone, so you still have that. I see what the camera sees on my screen on the controller. But I'm also looking with my physical eye where the drone is and how to fly the drone. And I'm flying it like with joysticks, right, like a video game. But you know, the batteries last 20 minutes and then I have to come back. So 20 minutes up in the air. And you also have to watch for tree branches and power lines. And so it's whatever side of that or part of the brain that deals with creativity is not the side that deals with like remembering FAA regulations and like knowing what to do in an emergency and all these other things you have to know when you're licensed and fly commercially. And so dealing with both of those things at the same time is a pretty big exercise for my little brain, right? And so it's kind of two opposite sides fighting against each other. And this is a good example of this. Like it's not a kind of a leisurely artistic process. It's like a sprint and like, you know, like sweaty palm kind of experience.
Now, do you need, I know you need permission. I know you can't even get permission to shoot in most places over New York City, but, and I assume that's true for most populated areas. So what about a place like this? Did you have to get special permits to shoot this?
No, so the rules are pretty clear about where you can and can't fly per FAA regulations. And so I'm a commercial licensed pilot by the FAA, which you have to be to be a journalist, you know, flying a drone or doing anything for film or something like this. And so it's the FAA has done a pretty decent job about laying out the requirements. And so no, these are all done completely legal, which is not, I can't say that for a lot of the drone photography we see kind of in our lives, but these were you know, the main limitations are the 400 feet, which I talked about, and no flight over people or moving cars. And so, and essentially, which is the hardest thing of all, no flight over people or moving cars. And then also like limitations within 5 miles, more or less, of airports. That's loosening up a bit lately in the last couple of years, but you can't get too close to an airport. And there's a lot of airports around. And so that really, those 3 restrictions severely limited where I could fly. But luckily this location, even though it's urban, I could fly it without flying over people.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is a good project then for drones, because in a lot of places you were looking for places that were derelict and that had been abandoned and that didn't have a lot of people around.
Yeah, I should say those rules over people changed on Wednesday of this last week. So we can now, if we meet certain conditions, fly over people, which is immensely helpful for the future of drone drones.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sivan, shall we look at another photo? Yes, this is a fascinating one. This one you can really spend a lot of time looking and studying this photo, wondering what is going on down there. Where are we, Travis? It's Slab City. Just the name itself is fascinating.
I think a lot of people go to Slab City and wonder what the hell is going on there. I think, you know, so Slab City is a really interesting destination, a really great place if anyone's nearby. It's near the Salton Sea in Southern California, and so it's It's a former military base. So the slabs, what you see there, the foundation was a military base that has largely been abandoned, and it's been taken over by a combination of different folks who kind of want to get away from it all. And so there's a lot of artists there, kind of outsider art type artists, think like Burning Man, but all the time, right? And so there's a lot of seasonal folks that live there that come up in RVs and then live, over the winter months, that sort of thing. But it's unofficial. It's not an official place on the map. There's no city. There's no electricity. There's no water. It's just a place for a really eclectic, interesting group of folks to be together.
And so are people living in those, what are they, buses, vans, trucks? There seems to be a little bit of everything.
Yeah, there are people living in those solar panels, right? And so there's a lot of, a lot of the artists that live there, make stuff out of what we would call, I think, junk, right? Which I think you see some there. And they often live very inexpensively, right? In old RVs or buses, and kind of make do with what's around them. So I think it's an interesting place to fly. And I think it's a really interesting place just to visit and meet a group of people that you don't often bump into, in High Falls, let's say. There's another community next to it called East Jesus. And that's a little more, it's like a permanent artist colony there, and they have a lot of exhibits. So that's kind of a suburb of Slab City.
How many people do you think live there?
Let's say a couple thousand.
Whoa, oh, a lot.
Yeah. A lot of them are seasonal, kind of come and go. I mean, I think the nature of it is transient to begin with. So I think an exact number I think it changes each day.
Mm-hmm.
But they're kind of set up almost for tourists at this point. So it's a really nice place.
Fascinating. Okay. And what's next, Sivan? This is great. Yeah, you had some great photos, Bombay Beach. It's a great backstory too.
Yeah, so this is right near Slab City. I mean, I feel like in some ways this might have been my favorite destination from the book. This was the last one I did right before the pandemic hit, luckily. So the Salton Sea, interesting, great backstory. Just to sum it up, it's basically, the Colorado River was diverted by accident 100 years ago and flowed into this part of California, which is below sea level, and it filled up this whole valley full of water. So it was basically it's basically a big puddle, I think you could call it. And so it filled up, and then after a couple years, it was diverted back to where it is now. This was before it slowed to a trickle, of course. And so this desert, which is incredibly hot, there was this huge inland lake that had formed, and throughout the late 40s and 50s, it was developed into a resort because it's not too far from San Diego or LA. And it was this beautiful lake in the middle of the desert. And so, Eisenhower vacationed there. But because it was essentially a puddle, it started to dry up, and the salt content got really high. And so the fish started dying, and started to have a certain smell because of that. And then there was various efforts over the years to counteract that, including allowing some of the water runoff from nearby agriculture fields to drain in, to offset the water that was evaporating, and that caused all sorts of other pollution. And so basically all of these resorts failed rather catastrophically. And so the little settlements that were there have remained. And so this is Bombay Beach, which, like Slab City now, is a really kind of eclectic group of people, a lot of artists that live there. and some other folks. And so this is the beach at Bombay Beach, right outside of that village. And so this is the beach and the part of the Salton Sea that has been dried up. And so you can see some wood there. It looks like from a campfire, and then just car tracks, some old foundations on the left, and car tracks all over the beach. But there's all sorts of interesting sculptures in Bombay Beach, another place that when you're driving back from Slab City, that's worth stopping at.
And that's part of the Salton Sea, you said, right?
That's on the Salton Sea.
On the Salton Sea, because there are some fantastic photos of the Salton Sea in the book, which are, they make a great section. The Salton Sea, again, the colors are so rich. There's, I guess, mineral deposits that were left there that create this incredible colors.
Yeah.
And so it's definitely a great section of the book. So, and these are, I guess, these are just the tracks of people driving in and out of the beach.
Yeah, this is just to the right, just out of the frame is the water, is the shoreline that's there, and just to the left where that foundation is the village. So it's just the area.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are many wonderful stories. Are there more photos that we haven't touched besides? I know we want to end on Kingston, and that's Kingston. Okay, before we get to that, maybe I should just, because I know that then Savannah is going to want to talk about Kingston, but I just want to plug one or two more things about the book. One of them is the introductory essay, which was written by a Pulitzer Prize-winning art critic from the Washington Post and a friend of Travis's named Philip Kennicott. And it's just a wonderful essay, and I'll just give you one short sentence from it, and I encourage you to buy the book and read it. He says, "You see the margins and fault lines of that society," meaning the industrial society of the United States that was coexistent with poverty and racism. "You see the margins and fault lines of that society, the sharp and widening gap between rich and poor, the environmental neglect and disdain, the detritus of wildfire capitalism that built but rarely conserved." Anyway, there are many such great sentences in that introduction. So I think that's another great aspect of the book. And there are also some very fun postcards at the back of the book where Travis cleverly inserted along with the footnotes and the descriptions of the photographs, the texts. And now let's talk about Kingston, New York, which we're very close to here. Now, what could this possibly be, Travis, that we're looking at?
This is the former IBM plant in Kingston, which anyone who lives around Kingston or anywhere really up in the Hudson Valley is well familiar with. This was, IBM had a huge footprint in the Hudson Valley, still has a moderate footprint, and so when this closed in 95. Is that, do I have the date right? I believe it was 95. I think close to 7,000 people were laid off. I don't have my notes here with me, but it was a huge blow to the economy of Kingston and to the Hudson Valley. And so it fit in nicely with what I was thinking about for this book, because it meant a big change. Just aesthetically on this image. And so the old plant is now called Tech City, and Kingston they've had a couple different iterations and ideas of what to do with this large space. I watched a movie. They do movies in the summer outdoor, like a drive-in theater, which was quite nice. Did that last summer. But anyway, in this photograph, I like this is the roof. Those are roof tiles, or essentially shingles, and then the plastic covering under them, and then that's the roof of the deteriorating building. And this and the other photograph that's in the book, which is in the parking lot, I liked it. When I think of IBM and when I think of the heyday of IBM in the 1980s, and I think of ticker tape, or not, I guess ticker tape's from before, but I think of lines of code, right? And ones and twos trickling up and down an old mainframe screen. And so when I was flying this and thinking about IBM, I saw this and I kind of made that connection. And those tiles reminded me of little ones and zeros on old analog style computers.
Well, yeah, it's a fascinating image, and I would never have thought of it as the roof of a building. And actually, I worked on a video with a friend who's on this call who did an exhibit on the demise of IBM, and I did the video for his exhibit. So thank you for. I think it's Savan. Would you like to begin the Q&A now?
Or I just wanted to show a little something here. Let's see how that's gonna
Yeah,
work out.
Savan did a little research to supplement.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to see how this actually looks, because we have, Google Maps. So here I am flying virtually without a drone, and I'm landing somewhere. Let's see, here it is. So we need to, it's still a little bit blurry, but it's coming back. So what we were looking at earlier is actually this, but actually it's the other way around. So I'm going to try to see if I can turn it. And
I think you got it there.
so this is what we were looking at. So that's what it is.
Yeah.
So between that.
Yeah, you don't even need a drone anymore.
Well, I mean, we don't have the sharpness, obviously. We don't have the color. We don't have a lot of it. I mean, this is how you cropped it, and the composition is so, mind-boggling. It's extremely hard to understand what this is. I mean, you should see when people see this at the gallery, you have the wildest guesses as to what we are looking at, from kitchen tiles. I mean, there is a tiling thing going on, but the roof, it doesn't always come up with. Because you've got this design with contrast between the dark and the light that's created, and the other thing that we are doing at the gallery that's just not happening is that we are actually putting them vertically, and these pictures were taken from above, so there is no up and down, there is no weight to it. By putting them in this way, we could have actually turned this around and put it in any other way. So we kind of suggesting that there is a direction here, or there is a weight there. This is like, that's what's the bottom is, and that's the top. By doing that, also we are, throwing people off. So those are kind of interesting decisions when we do, when we look at art that's been exhibited of drone photography. So I think it's kudos to you that you got to see something so compelling, so interesting, graphically, artistically, and just gave it to us. It's fascinating. It's fascinating, and people just spend time in front of it trying to figure out what they are looking at beyond the great composition. And I've got also a little video to show. I have a little video that shows you while operating the drone. So this is it. It's very short, but I think it's enough to give us an idea. You're very official with what you're wearing. So here is the drone. It's quite fascinating. That's it.
That's it.
So, when you're saying that this is a flying lawnmower, you're absolutely right, because the blades are exposed, as I noticed here. I mean, sometimes, when they are toys or something, they are protected in some sort of a frame. Here, there you can suddenly cut off a few things if it falls on something.
Yeah, it would not be pretty. No, and I think it makes, thanks for showing that Google Maps version of Kingston, because I think it's worth noting, the research I did for this, I did kind of traditional research and reading of articles, searching, Google searching, interviewing, all the kind of methods that journalists use. But then having this technology was really crucial. So I would find a location through reporting, and then I would kind of suss out the location on Google Earth long before I would ever go there. And that bit of technology, this Google Earth, I couldn't have really flown the drone, another piece of technology, without this bit of technology. It was really a two-step process.
So actually, this is how. I think a lot of people, have this question in mind: is how you come up with these images, you probably know the stories. I think the story, where's the horse, where's the cart? I think you kind of know the story and you want to check out how it's translated in images. And then perhaps you go there with the Google Maps and you look at it and you find graphically something really that's going to work. And then you decide to travel there. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, I mean, I see what it looks like from above. Often you read about a place and you're fascinated by it, and there's nothing left. It's gone. So there's no reason to go. Often you find a place and you're fascinated by it, and it's in restricted airspace, so you can't go there. Often you find a place and you want to go there, but there's no place where you can launch from, right? And so you have to see the drone with your naked eye at all times. So you can't fly like a mile away. You can only fly about 1,000 or 1,500 feet from where you take off from. So you have to use this technology to find a place. Okay, where am I going to park? Where am I going to launch from? Is it safe? Can I fly to my destination from my launch site without flying over people or moving vehicles? So all these things can be answered with Google Earth.
Right. So if you didn't have Google Earth, you probably wouldn't have been able to produce this work and this book, I guess, right?
Correct. Yeah, I think that's absolutely right.
Okay, so let's see. Let's open the floor for question. What do you think, Susan?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so if you have any questions, please unmute yourself, ask the question, and then mute yourself back. I think that will avoid any kind of unwanted background noises. So please go ahead. I think Ward wants to say something. Go ahead, Ward.
First of all, congratulations, Travis, on this wonderful group of work. And also, Susan, thank you for your terrific narration of this, and Sivan for doing the exhibition. Travis, I was wondering whether when you started out doing this project, you perceived the photos to be seen in a book, on the wall, or on a screen?
That's a good question, Ward. Thank you. Thank you for coming and for asking. I don't think I expected the images to be seen. let me put it that way. I didn't know what I was doing until kind of the very end, to be honest. So this was an experiment. This was a way for me, who had worked in video for the past 20 years, to kind of go back to what I started in, which is still photography, and to use a tool that I was completely new to, and it was an experimentation. And it reminded me of when I first learned how to use the still camera 20 some odd, 30 years ago. I don't know what it was. It was experimentation, and I love that kind of idea. So I didn't have much, much thought. These photographs are better, I think, when they're bigger. So the screen isn't great. For example, like on Instagram, which I've tried to use, I'm not very good at social media, but they just don't seem to work. I don't know, or maybe no one likes them. Maybe that's why. But like they don't seem to work as well as on the wall. And so the exhibit that I had an exhibit at Photoville in 2019, which was the Scars of Racism. I mentioned it. And so that was the kind of the first time I put that all together. And I worked on that specifically as an exhibit for the year before that. And so the book kind of came out from that. Sorry, that was probably a long-winded way. I think most photographers would want their images to be seen in person and large, I think.
Thank you.
We have a question from the audience through chat. Is there any color correction or enhancement? I think you already answered that. The answer is kind of no.
Yeah. Hi, Peter. Good to hear from you. See you again. Hi. Yeah, I mean, there's like basic color enhancement and correction like there is in Photoshop, and so there isn't like Instagram style filters, right? Which I would say drastically changes it. But there are the kind of the basic things that you would do in Photoshop to prepare the photo for publication. So there are those. I shoot in log format, which is a way of saying that it shoots really gray and flat, right? And it shoots in a kind of a gray tone, still color, but a gray tone, in order to kind of limit the highlights and the shadows, and it allows you to kind of pull those out a little bit more, right? So a lot of photographers shoot in this mode. So of course there are some enhancement, but I would say, you know, kind of the standard, the kind that I can do myself. So, you know, it's not that complicated.
Great. We have another question from the audience. Michael asks us, do you have any helpers when you fly the drone?
Yes, I do. I have my partner, Jenny Hamlet, was my visual observer for a lot of these flights. And so that is an official FAA designated role within the constructs of drone piloting. So sometimes I did it on my own when she was doing her work, but often, and I much preferred it when she was there. What that allows me to do, you know, the FAA requires you to have eyes on the drone at all times, physical eyes looking up in the sky on the drone at all times. And so when you have a visual observer there, she can do that. And I can stare more intently at the screen, you know, and see the images. And then ask her, oh, where's the drone? Where did it go? That sort of thing. She looks out for helicopters or planes, that sort of a thing. And so the idea of flying the drone in a two-person team is really ideal.
There's a question about pixels. I guess wants to know maybe the resolution of the pictures that are being taken.
90 degrees is perfect for the. So what do you mean, Peter? Oh, okay. So it's a 35 millimeter camera that's on the drone. It's made by DJI. DJI is the Chinese drone manufacturer, the biggest one in the world by far. And so they've created their own camera, but it is with a 35 millimeter sensor and interchangeable lenses, their own ones. They're made of plastic, right? But they're made of plastic so they can be really light. So it doesn't affect the performance of the drone. So the quality, the pixels, I think it's, I don't know, I could look it up while I'm on my computer. I think it's like 6,000 pixels across. So it's that size of an image.
I got a question by email from a gentleman who may know you. His name is Gene.
I wonder who that is.
He says, with thousands, maybe tens of thousands such dying sites in the US, how and why did you pick these particular ones that are featured in the book?
I think I just looked up the pixels. It is 6,008 by 4,000. That's the original raw file, just for the photo geeks here. How did I pick those? It's a combination of things that I found interested, that I was drawn to, but it's a much smaller subset than those stories. It was the places that I was interested and drawn to, but that allowed me to fly the drone for legal reasons or logistic reasons. You know, like I mentioned before, ones that were accessible within 1,500 feet of a parking spot, and ones that were not in restricted airspace. Without those limitations, it would have been a thicker book, or a shorter time creating it, one or the other.
This is an interesting question. It says the film Nomadland has brought added attention to communities such as those at Slab City and Bombay Beach. Did you feel tempted to document at ground level?
Yeah, I think, you know, several people have asked me that, or they see, you know, I'm a photojournalist, right? Or I'm a photographer and a journalist. And, you know, often that means photographing people. And so often the reaction to this work is, well, there's not any people in it. Why don't you put people? Why don't you do videos? Why don't you do videos of people, interviews of people on the ground and how this affects them? And so I think that's all makes sense. I feel like if my students came to me with this project, that's what I would tell them to do. But I specifically wanted to try to do something without people. And so because everything I'd done up until this point in my career has been really like people oriented, focused around people, kind of in-depth documentary style videos of people intimately. And so this, to me, flying is a challenge, as I've suggested, and trying to tell a story without people is also a challenge. So I actually resisted doing that in a traditional way. I also felt the need to limit myself because I think I just have a natural like tendency to add on more stuff. And it's kind of a miracle this ever got done. It kind of got done because of a fluke and a deadline. But if it wasn't for that, then it would still be going on. So taking people out of the equation made it much easier.
Thank you. I have a question by email from Pam, and that's interesting. The question is, do you classify these pictures as art, as science, as geographic, or historic, or where do you see them? I personally, can tell you that since this is being shown in the gallery, and I find a lot of artistic qualities in there that definitely excited me, and I wanted to show it immediately. So no doubt about the artistic value of it. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think I'm in the tradition of documentary photography and journalism, and like my people, my tribe, many of them are here. Don't use art. Don't use that word. That's kind of a we would I would like think of that as pretentious. I think to call this art. I would never call this art. So. But that's more a symptom of the kind of the culture of photojournalism, I think. There's a long history of photojournalists and documentary photographers producing art that's shown at the finest galleries around the world. But we're often not comfortable with that label.
Cool. What is your next project from Richard in the audience?
I don't know. What do you think, Richard? Should we collaborate on something, some academic project? Great, some cross-CUNY collaboration happening. I don't know. I'm excited for a couple of things. I'm excited to fly over people, and those new rules with some changes in hardware will allow me to fly over people. So the drone I like. So I'm interested in how that will change what I can do with the drone. I also think one of the really advantages of being a professor and being able to experiment is to do projects like this, which 6 years ago I never would have dreamed that I would do, or that I would have a photography book out and a show in such a gallery as the Wired Gallery. Like I would never dream of that, and so I like the idea of doing something equally unusual in another direction. And so I've had things, idealets sprouting here and there. But I feel really to be in a privileged place and to be able to have time to kind of consider that and work on that over the next couple of years.
Can I have a footnote? Can I give a footnote? Can you hear me?
Sure,
Yeah.
We hear you. Please go ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to give a footnote to Susan, by the way, very good job. It was curious, I was curious that so many people were interested in the Salton Sea, Slab City, and Bombay Beach. And as you mentioned, Mr. Moderator, the theme of Nomadland is very much about what Slab City and the Salton Sea and Bombay is all about. Prior to those films, there was a film done maybe a decade ago called Into the Wild. And it was a true story about Alexander Supertramp, who died in a bus in Alaska under Denali. But before he went to Denali, the film was shot in Bombay Beach and Slab City. And it was from there that he left for Alaska. So it's Slab City and Bombay Beach has had sort of a cinematic attraction before now. So I thought I would just point that out. So, because there was some curiosity about that spot. Travis lives 5,000 miles away from there. We live about 5 miles from there. So not in Slab City, but I just thought I would interject that footnote.
These are my parents, in case anyone is. Gets that.
Actually, we don't live 5 miles. We actually live more in the Coachella Valley, but just to clarify that.
Great. So I have a question here from Tracy. Are the FAA rules the same for all drones? I have a smaller one, not a toy, but not as large as yours, look to be question mark. So what's your answer on that?
Yeah, the rules are all the same between 0.55 pounds, which is 250 grams, up to 55 pounds. If you're using it for commercial purposes, so if you're doing, ads for real estate or, anything for your business, the rules are the same regardless of the weight. There are very few that are lighter than that. If you're an amateur, right, if you're just doing it for fun, the rules are slightly different, but not that different.
Okay, anybody else asking questions? Please unmute yourself. Going one, going twice. This is an art gallery. We've done auctions, so we may close it just like that. All right, so that's it. Well,
I have a question.
At the last second, you got it. That was a Picasso, and you owe me $24 million.
Well, if you'll be showing Travis's photos next weekend, and
Yes.
after that, if people want to purchase any of the photographs, will they still be available for purchase at your gallery?
Well, I would be delighted to keep a few of his pieces, because the rest of the gallery, as you saw, show works by local artists. So if Travis doesn't mind, I'll certainly keep at least a couple and show them in the remaining portion of the gallery.
Okay.
And the book, yes, is for sale. It's $45, and if anybody would like to purchase that, you guys can contact me. I can set one aside. I can ship one. It's all possible. Yeah, I'm Armenian. I'll do anything for a sale. Oops, this was recorded. I think I should have said that. Well,
Thank
all
you,
right,
Travis.
that's okay. Thank you so much, Travis. Listen, thank you, Susan. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for being here. And this is our first, broadcast, or however you call this, virtual talk with an artist. And I think it's a good start. We have over 30 people, and I hope we can do this again. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.